Nick is 22 years old. To pursue his education in another city, he has been living separately from his family since the age of 18. Being away from the people he cares about often worries Nick. He checks on his family and close friends every day to ensure they're doing well. For the past few months, he's been dating one of his classmates named Sarah. Sarah is an outgoing social girl who spends a lot of time hanging out with her friends. One afternoon, Sarah told Nick that she was hanging out with two of her friends. After an hour, Nick sent a text message to check out how she was doing. Some time passed, but he didn't receive a response. Concerned, he called her, but she didn't pick up. Nick grew worried and called again. Still no answer. He called repeatedly, and after 7 or 8 consecutive unanswered calls, Nick started to feel genuinely concerned. Terrifying thoughts flooded his mind, and he began to imagine the worst-case scenarios. Could it be that Sarah lied to me? Why didn't she mention the name of the friends she was with? Right now she's probably sitting in a cafe, engrossed in conversation with these people, not even checking her phone. Could she be tired of me? Oh, man, no. What am I even thinking? A voice in Nick's mind tells him that Sarah is not like that, and he feels guilty for having such thoughts. But the anxiety about Sarah's situation lingers. Nick calls Sarah's sister. Maybe she has some information. Her sister says she's unaware of the details of Sarah's plans, but she remembers Sarah mentioning meeting two of her friends at Quizland Park. Nick immediately gets into his car and heads towards Quizland Park. On the way, his phone rings. It's Sarah. Hey, Nick, what's up? You called me 10 times. I was at the cinema with friends and I didn't notice you calling. My phone had no signal. Nick cannot tolerate uncertain situations. Uncertainty about events deeply disturbs him. He tries to check on things and people as much as he can to ensure that everything is in its proper place. For example, last week when the university exams ended, Nick could not wait for the grades to be released and emailed his professors to ask if they could inform him of his grades sooner. One of the professors didn't respond to his email, and Nick became worried that maybe sending the email had not been the right thing to do. Could it be that his professor now has a negative impression of him? He showed his email to Sarah and some other friends, trying to make sure he hadn't made a mistake. But the more time passed, the more anxious he became, fearing that he had done something wrong, or, worse, that his grade was so low that the professor didn't bother to respond. Uncertainty for Nick is like a dark room where a monster can emerge at any moment. Nick tries to control those moments to avoid confronting this monster. But can we really control everything? Uncertainty is an inevitable part of everyday life. The world is full of events and occurrences of which we cannot have complete knowledge. We cannot know for sure what goes on in other people's minds or what state they're in. Uncertainty is frustrating in any case. Some people learn to manage themselves in the face of uncertain situations. They patiently wait for the outcome to become clear or find a way to cope with uncertainty. However, individuals like Nick experience greater anxiety in the face of uncertain and unpredictable situations where immediate certainty is not attainable. In psychology, this characteristic is called intolerance of uncertainty, which means a tendency to react negatively in the face of uncertain situations. Those who lack tolerance for uncertainty experience high levels of anxiety, fear, or worry when confronted with unknown or ambiguous situations. The negative and unpleasant thoughts that flow through their minds intensify their anxiety moment by moment. Individuals like Nick engage in behaviors such as excessive checking and seeking reassurance in order to alleviate this anxiety. These behaviors are known as safety behaviors, actions taken to restore psychological safety in situations where one feels insecure. But why do people have different tolerance thresholds for ambiguity and uncertainty? Some find these easier to tolerate, while others, like Nick, suffer from severe psychological distress. Research tells us that the roots of intolerance of uncertainty can be traced back to the early years of life when we're first exposed to ambiguous situations. To gain a more precise understanding of these factors, a group of researchers conducted a longitudinal study examining 60 children aged 5 to 6 over a 15-year period. They discovered 2 factors in childhood that predict intolerance of uncertainty in adulthood: behavioral inhibition and attachment style. To better understand these 2 factors and how they influence the development of intolerance of uncertainty, let's travel back to Nick's childhood. Nick's temperament, when he was born, was such that he had a lower threshold for fear as an infant. It means that the structures in Nick's brain responsible for experiencing fear would become active more quickly in response to stimuli, people, and new situations. This fear caused Nick to be more vigilant than others and perceive neutral situations as threatening. Behavioral inhibition meant that Nick, in the face of unknown and novel phenomena, became so fearful and anxious that he couldn't continue to function in those situations. For example, in the presence of a stranger he couldn't continue playing, or in a new environment he couldn't distance himself from his mother and engage in exploration. Children who exhibit higher levels of behavioral inhibition, just like when they experience greater fear in response to new stimuli, also feel a sense of danger and experience more fear when faced with uncertain situations. The second factor predicting intolerance of uncertainty is attachment style. When Nick was 1 year old, he suddenly lost his father in an accident. Prior to his father's death, Nick's mother spent more time with him. She was always present, playing with Nick for long hours during the day and taking care of him. However, the circumstances have now changed, and his mother has to work alone to support their family financially. Nick is not used to his mother's absence. Every time she's not present, he expects her to return soon and pay attention to him, to play with him. But his mother's busy and leaves Nick with his grandmother or a babysitter. Often her absence becomes so prolonged that Nick, in his small world of thoughts, becomes terrified at the idea that his mother may not come back. Nick develops an anxious, resistant, insecure attachment with his mother. It means that he clings to her whenever she is around to avoid experiencing the dreadful feeling of her absence, and he becomes extremely restless when they are separated, resisting attempts to soothe him. In Nick's mind, the absence of his mother becomes an uncertain situation where he cannot guarantee a positive outcome. What if his mother too will never return, just like his father? Nick learns to distance himself from uncertainty and tries to keep everything in front of his eyes to protect himself. The inability to tolerate uncertainty remains with Nick as he grows up and affects various aspects of his life. Nick attempts to escape uncertainty by seeking excessive reassurance and by constantly checking. While this may temporarily alleviate his anxiety, it drains him of energy in the long run and becomes distressing for those around him. What should Nick do about his problem? The solution lies in increasing his ability to tolerate uncertainty. It's not an easy task, but it's not impossible either. The first step in breaking this cycle is identifying safety behaviors. Safety behaviors are the behaviors Nick engages in to protect himself from a perceived dangerous or uncertain situation. These behaviors can be recognized, but stopping them would be like asking Nick to throw away his shield on a battlefield where he expects an arrow to strike him at any moment. But is there really a battle? The next step is for Nick to have a more accurate assessment of the threatening nature of an uncertain situation. Are there enough external cues to determine if this is a threatening situation? Beyond worst-case scenarios, what other probable scenarios can be imagined for this uncertain situation based on the available information? Seeking psychotherapy can assist Nick in taking these steps and increasing his tolerance for uncertain situations. With the help of psychotherapy, when Nick successfully experiences a secure relationship and breaks the cycle of uncertainty safety behavior over a long period of time, gradually new experiences of uncertainty enter his mind that may not necessarily be threatening in the end. These experiences create a more adaptive cycle in dealing with uncertainty. Does this mean that Nick will never again feel concerned in the face of uncertainty? Not really. Nick learns to manage his anxiety and refrain from safety behaviors. Over time, he can tolerate a higher dose of uncertainty and, if a situation is truly dangerous, he becomes able to wait for external signs to confirm the threat. This helps him feel more secure in subsequent situations, and to only experience heightened anxiety when there is a genuine threat present.